brand and a Valvoline brand. So those two things to me sound like pretty big challenges, right? So you've got the additive companies trying to take your value proposition as the technology person to the OEMs, and then you've got, at the same time, commoditization. I'm wondering what you see sort of as, when you look, what's the best way to combat both those trends or to shift your strategy to deal with those two trends?
Yep. So I mean, this discussion clearly was very central to the dialogue, the strategic dialogue within the lubricants business, and it is today, and it will be for a number of years. I mean, the way it has been traditionally framed is effectively it's where maybe saying that the additives are trying to take the lubricants provider out of the equation perhaps is not the dynamic itself, because as you will know, most of them are partly owned or owned
right.
by oil companies anyway. But the reality is that the driver, I think, is that ultimate customers that actually use significant amount of lubricants have realized that lubricants is a category per se, and in that sense, they've got the brand to do that, which some of them definitely do. There is an advantage to brand because you have loyalty after the 2 years of warranty, for instance, if you got something like that, and effectively, as a category, you'll try to own the more you can in order that you can drive the development and cannot be more in control of your destiny. Now, Shell really entered the market with global large customers in a fairly transparent way. But people like BP, for instance, or Castrol, have really made lots of money by effectively taking the entire market and driving that very effectively. So I'm not trying to be negative here, and making lots of money from the category itself, leaving very little or nothing to the automotive manufacturers. Now, they're woken up to that game, and the market has become a lot more transparent, and the people that actually can do that, they are trying to take control of that as a category, as a money generator. And in that sense, what you'll observe is what you just said. For effectively, the additives nowadays talk a lot more directly with them. The branding is driven in more in the direction of the ultimate OEM. So those are clearly categories of that. So how do you combat that? So I think so one has to decide first of all if the shift in direction there is permanent or is temporary.
Okay.
So you're gonna have to assess to the extent of take an automotive provider and think about what their priorities are. If actually really owning the entire lubricant is a strategic priority, or it's just at the moment it looks like a moneymaker. So I think my personal opinion, the jury for me would still be out on that one, because in the context of the various things that a car manufacturer has got today, I think some of them will probably take priority more than others. And now, if those end up being sustainable in the future, forget the fact that there is electrification, so that changes the game even further. So if that is sustainable, then I guess I think it will take a long time for any of the automotive manufacturer to build an effective network on the ground that is capable of penetrating the market in the same way as the big lubricants brands can. So typically, it's not a given that you go to your workshops and you can sell your own lubricants. In some places, you can force it in. In a lot of places today, the control is not there, and they might continue to do what they were doing before for quite a bit of time until I think it becomes a master necessity, and that's imposed. Now, the value of having a lubricant provider in the market, they have the capability, they've got the people on the ground, they have been doing for a long, long time. So clearly the support in doing that becomes quite important. So in a way, well, I mean, there is an acceptance that some of the stuff you were making money in is going to have to be shared a lot more. Equally, though, if you play on the other front, and that's what we said at the beginning, there are areas of services, things you would be developing, and etc., that can help you in terms of effectively recreate and regenerate value then compensating for areas where you would be lost.
So, no, I think that's really helpful and makes a lot of sense. So, I want to make sure I get to this topic because you brought up marine earlier on and sort of talked about, and I think I've read about the product that you mentioned where Shell all of a sudden, the lubricant, you don't need to be switching out oils as you go through environmental exclusion zones. But when I look at marine, it seems to me to be very, very cost-centric, very, very volume-based with a few players. And, not, clearly it's an area where companies like Shell and Total are trying to play in, but, BP isn't as focused on that. Maybe Exxon isn't as focused on that. I'm wondering what you see in your mind that makes the marine sector be appealing.
Okay, so marine is a tough story, and it has been, I think, for anybody that has been playing in the market over the last 7 or 8 years. So one of the things that I didn't say, so I never said that the shift of technology that Shell did a number of years ago was the right market move. Actually, in hindsight, although clients and customers were very excited about the product, it actually hit the market at the time of crisis, whereby you had all sorts of issues where effectively slow steaming being a practice in the market, which meant effectively people actually went around a lot slower to consume less fuel, but it becomes very, very demanding on the engine. So some of the quality and property of the lubricants per se effectively pushed the manufacturers, the 2 or 3 manufacturers and design and manufacturers of engines, to be very, very conservative in the market, which worked completely against the strategy and the product strategy that Shell had in place. So that's one component. So for trying to be very customers focused and technology focused, and you combine with what had happened in the market, that strategy did not work very well. Now, then you point to the other point, right? So, indeed, in a market that actually has gone in significant decline, clearly everybody has become very cost effective. So the Lukoils of the world, which actually effectively blend very, very, or traditionally blended very cheap products, clearly suddenly have an advantage to enter a market where otherwise they probably would have not got to the table. Now, what has that done to the market is effectively everybody that had a product in some space have tried to respec in a way to make it more cost effective with less utilization. So that's, I mean, I'm clearly oversimplifying and trying to tell a story of years in few lines. But fundamentally, that's where the market has gone. So if you had a product out there that was designed to be very cheap, you suddenly found yourself to have a significant advantage. If you have a product that was spec'd to be very good but equally expensive, then you have to try and scope it down, which will never get you to the optimal cost position because you're scoping something, you're effectively reducing something which was expensive in the first place. So I suspect that the marine, I mean, this is my personal reading, so I don't know what Shell is doing now. I suspect that in that market, the obvious conclusion will continue to be you will want to have a cheap product, a cheap base product out there, but for somebody that really wants to be in that market and do it very well, there is scope for services. Because the marine business is, I mean, the product per se is not the differentiator any longer. So it's the ability to serve the client and the customer in different places in a very effective way, in a very transparent way, and giving them the option to pick up being lubricants or fuel in the cheapest way on their route in a very, very easy way becomes a great service to have and you attract clients. So I think that's the shift that I think you will see for somebody that really wants to make an impact in marine. Now,